fresh out of the oven. It's Cinema Bums. I'm Emmett.
And I'm Wade.
Cinema Bums is a podcast where we watch a lot of Cinema Bums.
Cinema Bums is us. Cinema Bums is you. Cinema Bums is me.
It's the shared experiences we have while we watch these crazy movies.
It's the force that binds all living things.
It's in everything, every plant, and every person, even the little kid with the broom. On that point, Cinema Bums has reached a landmark. We've completed X23, our series on the X-Men.
Woo! I can't believe we've done it.
Oh my gosh.
I
wow.
can't believe you've done this.
Yeah, I can't believe you've done this.
Wow. 4 months talking about the X-Men movies. Wow.
I regret that I have but one life to give to talk about the X-Men movies. I wish, honestly, I can honestly say right now, after having just watched The New Mutants, I would readily do it all again.
Well, I'd recommend you listen to this podcast before you say that. Yeah, I think knowing what I know now, I wouldn't have agreed to do these movies to be the first thing we do in our podcast, because I think a lot of people think about us as an X-Men podcast. Which, like, we have just been talking about X-Men for 4 months.
Yeah, so I guess it's not unreasonable.
But that wasn't really, like, the founding goal. But the founding goal was to examine how movies change over time. Mm-hmm. And I think that happens in this series in an interesting degree. Mm-hmm. It's too much and not enough change, kind of. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, there are just, like, sections where it's like, oh, okay, now we're getting a movie every year and they're all kind of the same thing.
For sure.
But anyway, what I would like to say is I maybe wouldn't have done it now, but I also think if we hadn't have done it first, we would never do it.
Yeah. Yeah, it would never make it through a roster ever again. So
yeah,
I appreciate you having faith in the series. And
so I remember when we started this whole crazy little thing, you telling me that you thought there was some underappreciated, untalked about value to the series that you think has been just like unnoticed in the public eye. Do you feel that we've found it and we've talked about it?
Yeah. I can do.
Okay.
I mean, I think there is very little value in this series, to be honest. Artistically, morally, aesthetically. But I also think some of them are pretty fun to watch. I don't know. That's really it. I've got not a lot about it as like I've found no redeeming quality for the series as a whole. That's what I'll say. Like, there's no one thing that I can point to anymore and be like, that's the thing that the X-Men is, that the X-Men does that nothing else does. Mm-hmm. As a group of movies, I would say there is no good reason. There's no good reason to watch them the way that we watched them. Like, in the order that we watch. If you think about them, we watched them all out of whack and out of order in the order that they would make any sort of sense in. Like, any normal person wouldn't watch the Deadpool movies in between the other movies in this series. Mm-hmm. You know, might not watch any of the other X-Men movies at all when they watch the 3 Wolverine movies. You know, so might have watched all 4 Decades quadrilogy movies in a row or something. I don't know. I don't think they have anything going for them on the whole. I think individually there's still cool stuff going on and that some of them are worth watching on their own merits. But
I think that there is, of course, like the historical importance, which is maybe what the series is most known for now, is just that for that original X-Men 2000 was the thing that started this whole mess that we're in today of superhero movies. I think it's also fascinating how many colossal disasters of production there is in this series. Like, I know that we've just done one series, so I don't want audiences to think that that's normal. Like, there is maybe one of those in a series, and it's infamous. You've got, I mean, well, X-Men just took forever to get made, but it wasn't necessarily. But, like, The Last Stand, Origins Wolverine, The New Mutants, Dark Phoenix, Deadpool, like, those movies are, like, not just, like, flops, like, historic impossible to get made
Yeah.
tentpole disasters.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's been really interesting to track that stuff, and wild that like so many of them happened in one series. The old messy the old messy team.
The old messy team.
Oh,
the
boy.
old problematic faves, the X-Men.
Oh boy. We've watched 13 movies in the series.
Mm-hmm.
What was your flop to bop ratio for the 13?
I believe,
Uh-huh.
I haven't gone back to listen to every episode and see what I actually said, but I believe that it is 9 bop to 4 flop.
Okay.
And I believe that the only 4 that I've given flops to are the 3 in the Wolverine trilogy,
Mm-hmm.
and The Last Stand.
I don't
How
think
about
I
for you? What's your flop to bop ratio?
I have 8 flops to 5 bops.
Okay. I would also say that in retrospect, have the, like my whole feeling on the flop or bop question having evolved a little.
Mm-hmm.
A bop now just being a movie that I would want to watch, and a flop being a movie that I would not want to have to ever sit through again.
That's interesting. I would say what my pop to flop understanding has come to be, just like my personal scale, is that a bop is like a movie that's really good.
Okay.
Like, not great, not a masterpiece, not a 9 or a 10, but like a movie that's like really enjoy and is worth watching.
Yeah.
Not just in the context of the series, but in the context of like anything overall. And a flop is anything that's not that.
Okay.
So there are some movies that I gave a flop that I think are like serviceable, that just like don't get there to being like really enjoyable and recommendable, but are like interesting and you watch and think about. But it's just not like, to me, a bop is like an actually very good movie. Because it's not like, it's not good, bad, or normal. It's like a bop. Like a bop is like actually good to me, just to me personally.
Fair. Yeah.
And so I think that's also where like The Dark Phoenix is a movie you gave a bop and I gave a flop. And I would say we felt exactly the same about that movie.
That's true. That's probably true. Yeah.
Let me see. By my count, 8 out of these 13 movies passed the Bechdel test.
Wow. Okay.
It's worth noting that 3 of those are in like singular conversations with unnamed female characters, like a nurse or a hotel keep. So they did technically pass, but in the spirit of like thinking about movies where female characters have agency and are like more than just their relationship to men or their place in the plot.
I would say there's 2 of those movies, maybe.
I think New Mutants and the Wolverine and Dark Phoenix, in that order, are the 3 best on female representation.
I forgot about the Wolverine.
The Last Stand is also good just in how prominently it features Storm, although not like positive
Not like
representation of women. But that is, I would say, probably like the 4th most women speaking in any of these movies.
Oh, that's fair. Yeah.
What do you have any stats about the body counts that you've been tracking?
Yes. Okay. So for the 2 most deaths in the movies, and granted these are vaguely accurate, so it's Logan with, I believe, 79 and First Class with 77. But either one of those could secretly be more than the other by like an extra 2 kills or something that I missed. Which Logan, you're like, yeah, that tracks. It's the most violent. It is like definitely the most graphically violent one. First Class is not necessarily what you would expect. A lot of these sit right in the 50 kill range, like the Deadpools and several of the like other Decades quadrilogy are in like the 40s or 50s. X2 is in the 40s. A lot of them sit pretty comfortably there with like mostly just a bunch of soldiers and people getting killed. The 2 lowest are the original X-Men and New Mutants. New Mutants being the very lowest, with only 2 confirmed kills.
Those are also the ones that really focus just on the mutants and don't have sort of like a bunch of expendable humans that come into play.
That's
so that
true.
they can kill people and have cool action scenes.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and give my ranking.
Yeah, please.
So here we go. I'm just gonna run through them. 13, X-Men The Last Stand. Even if we didn't know about the allegations of Brett Ratner, he should be in jail for making this movie. Number 12, Deadpool 2, Worthless Drivel. Number 11, Deadpool. 10, X-Men Apocalypse, a movie that should be studied in film class when we talk about like the gross excesses of the 2010s. Having said that, me likey the rom-com. Number 9, Dark Phoenix. Number 8, The New Mutants. Me likey the rom-com. Number 7, X-Men, a movie that is like, despite all of like the sins of the father it has, like a movie that has some stuff that is really compelling. I think that Rogue Logan relationship is like still compelling to me looking back at all these movies. Number 6, The Wolverine, Yukio, favorite character in the entire franchise. Number 5, X2, a movie I loved as a child that is held up a lot better than most movies I loved as a child. Number 4, X-Men Origins Wolverine, a movie that is better at being bad than almost any other movie is at being good.
Yeah, it's true.
I maintain what I said at the time, that like if you only watch one of these movies, it should be that one, because it is like unbelievable to behold the many ways in which it is so terrible, and it is endlessly entertaining to me. Felt by far the fastest of any of these movies.
That ladder sequence. Still think about it.
Number 3, X-Men Days of Future Past. I will say, going into this rewatch, I thought my list would be number 1, Days of Future Past, number 2, The Wolverine, number 3, X2.
Okay.
That was what it was in my head and would have been going into this.
Okay.
Days of Future Past at number 3, I think we've just seen so much else now that sort of like the meta stuff isn't as bold. Also, knowing where it goes is kind of disappointing.
Knowing that it never pays off in the 2023 timeline is a little frustrating.
Yeah, but I do think that it's like a really enjoyable movie. I think all the 70s stuff is so fun and like so much more enjoyable than anything else Bryan Singer does, because it's like so outside of his aesthetic. And I genuinely think that James McAvoy deserved the Best Supporting Oscar that year for this movie. Like a world-class, unbelievably good performance.
Truly great.
Number 2, X-Men First Class.
Okay.
Which is like is kind of now being retroactively considered to be the bop of the franchise, and is always one that I have been kind of like, I've always been like, I like it fine, but I don't really get the hype. But like, I did totally get the hype this time. It's just like such like a simmering, passionate movie, and I love all of the filmography. I love how influenced it is by these 60s movies and by Sean Connery, ripped to a real one. And I think like the performances in it, especially from Fassbender and McAvoy. Also, it bears noting, the only movie in these 13 that had any creative input from a woman. The only film that was written or directed by a woman. That shows not just in the female characters, but in like the tender care and emotional depth that Charles and Eric have in this movie.
Which they really just kind of ride that high for the rest of the decade's quadrilogy.
Yeah.
Like they don't really ever have writing as good as that movie again. They just like kind of are like, oh, they have a relationship. Now let's do.
Oh, also, I wake up in a cold sweat all the time thinking about how Apocalypse didn't pay off that Quicksilver was Magneto's son. Like a point in Days of Future Past, a main driving plot point. In Apocalypse, they bring both of them back for the sequel. Quiet as a church mouse on the topic. Number 1, Logan. A movie I didn't like the first time I watched it. A movie that I couldn't really see past the violence. You once told me that Scott Pilgrim vs. the World is a movie you think is actually both underrated and overrated. And that is also how I feel about Logan. This is like the movie in the series that everyone loves, but I think maybe like the actual reasons that like stood out to me about why it's so wonderful this time are like not the things that everyone talks about.
Yeah.
Like I think everyone is like gritty, bloody, Western, good. R-rated, dark, good, violent, gritty Western. And I think that stuff is like whatever. But I think that like how prescient this movie is, how I think this movie is so successful as like one of the crowning pieces of art of Trump's America because it is about the effect that he has on the people.
That's true.
And it is like about of like very, very close extrapolation of how things are. You know, like a movie that's all about immigrants and all about the border and all about like thinking about yourself as something and making those divisions in your head. And I think that's why it's so much more successful than something like Wonder Woman 1984, which is about Trump as a person, which is like trying to evaluate like what creates that need in his soul and like how his father is involved, how there's that like void of masculinity and him being a businessman, and like it's that he like needs to accept in his heart in order to change. But this is a movie that like never mentions a Trump-like figure in any capacity. You're just seeing like the results of it.
Yeah.
You're seeing the extrapolation of this world. And I think in that way it like sadly aged so much better than it was at the time even.
You watch and you're like, that doesn't look like the future to me.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I feel like in that way, this is not like a reference I do glibly, but I hope it isn't, but it feels like it could be a movie like Do the Right Thing, where you watch it in 40 years and you're like, this is about today. You know, where it's like about an issue that is so real at the beginning of the thing. So
that's an interesting point.
Yeah, I like Mangold a lot. I think that stuff is really stuck out to me on the rewatch. And I also like my favorite type of storytelling in any movie is like where they don't really give it to you and it's there if you want it. It's not important for the plot, but like if you go and find it, it's there. And all of that stuff about like how the world ended and what happened to the X-Men and the Corn and the ties to Apocalypse. Like, eat all of that stuff up. All right, what's your ranking?
Okay, so this is going to get a little complicated because I wrote it down and then I had changes of heart on different things. But at number 13, number one least favorite, Last Stand. At number 13. Number 12, we have Logan. At number 11, we have Deadpool 2. At number 10, we have Deadpool. At number, what are we counting down?
9. I guess we'd be at.
At number 9, The Wolverine. In number 9. Number 8, X-Men the Original. Number 7, X-Men Origins Wolverine, baby. I think it's the straight middle of the road of the series. It is the median of the series. It's like if you wanted to watch any movie to get like what the whole series was about, watch that movie. You would know everything. Right above that at number 6, we're going to have a little film called Days of Future Past. Even though I think it's probably maybe the most well-crafted of all of the Decades quadrilogy. It's the least enjoyable to watch. X2 at number 5, same spot as you, I think.
Yeah.
It holds up. It's like when I was thinking back through them, I was like, that's the only old one that I would want to watch. That's the only one that I would be like, yeah, like I'd watch that. So now we're into the ones that I would actually watch, starting with X2. Would watch again. Dark Phoenix at number 4. New Mutants at number 3. First Class at number 2.
Good God.
Or baby, anytime, any place, any function, give it to me. Apocalypse, baby. Number 1 greatest film I've ever seen. So of course it's the greatest film in the X-Men series. It is.
Is this a meme?
No, like I'm pretty sure, I don't remember it, but I'm pretty sure it's the best movie I've ever seen. But certainly First Class is a strong second. I think here's the great thing about First Class. It wasn't directed by Bryan Singer, and it's a good movie. And it's X-Men. It's like all three. It's like the three things that you want. It's really good. I also feel the same way about New Mutants. and Dark Phoenix. They're all like exciting. I think that Dark Phoenix, Apocalypse, and New Mutants share a certain kind of like high-paced incomprehensibility that, to me, is maybe what I'm looking for in a superhero movie.
What about Deadpool 2?
It also has high-paced incomprehensibility. I just don't like it as much.
Yeah.
I just don't like Deadpool. Like, I know that like on our Deadpool episodes, I have stuck up for the movies because I enjoyed watching them more than some other movies in the series. But I want to be clear. I don't like Deadpool, and I think those movies are pretty garbage, and I wouldn't want to watch them again. I just want to watch them again more than some of the other movies in the series.
Okay.
I also think they're a little bit more straightforward than either of those than any of those three movies are. You know, they're a little bit more like in Deadpool. You're like, oh, there's kind of a plot and like weird jokes are happening and stuff. In these movies, you're just like, things are happening. A lot of things are happening in each of these movies. Oh, Jessica Biel, she's an alien now. Okay, cool. We're gonna have we're gonna have Bryce Dallas Howard over here, he, like being the bug lady from the second Men in Black. I mean, yeah, it's weird. And then you just, and then you have the two Stark sisters kicking ass, taking names. In all three of those movies, there's a through line. And not Days of Future Past, First Class. The redeeming quality of that for me is the relationship between Michael Fassbender and James McAvoy. And for a lot of those movies is. But yeah, Apocalypse.
Not much love for Hugh Jackman, despite you
they're
like modeling your life on him.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like very disappointed on the rewatch by a lot of not like his acting, but just by like a lot of the stuff that he ends up doing. Like, I just remember him being way cooler. I remember him being like a better character, and maybe that's because I hope it's at least to some degree it's because our ideals of masculinity have evolved since the early 2000s, like when we started watching these movies, and that like that kind of aggressive, like gruff motorcycle riding bad boy thing is like not really what we aspire to be anymore. I don't know. That could be part of it. And you're just like, wow, you're really kind of a pretty bad role model in some ways. Although sometimes he like tries to make the right choice a lot of the time. I think there's a really interesting, I think he's part of the tail end of a really interesting period of like reluctant father films, which is probably like a whole, like something we could spend an entire year on a podcast getting into. It's maybe not our territory, but there might be there might be just like other better stories to tell about male superheroes, you know, like there could be something else other than like everything I touch I break, and that's sad.
Right.
Like that's a story, but I feel like there's a lot of that. And there could be something else.
I also think the X-Men have like a clearer place in the cultural context of like the 60s and the 90s than they do today. Like today it's like everyone reads comics. Like everyone's a weirdo.
Right.
Everyone's queer.
Right.
You know, it's like but in the 90s, like it, like a guy like Bryan Singer is like an X-Men. Like that makes sense why it's so popular. Like these weird inner city kids who are like queer and loved counterculture stuff in a time when there weren't wars and there weren't like coups against the government, you know, and it was like an act of rebellion to like documentary films and to like want to make realism indie movies and put those into your superhero movies, you know?
Right.
Like that's like a time where it's so easy to see the place of the X-Men, and I think that's why Zane eloquently put that like all the people who grew up in that era created some of the art that we grew up with as kids about, you know, like Harry Potter, like all of these like kids in schools, magic kids in magic schools type stories. It's just a couple brief final thoughts. My brain is so scattered from watching these. I want to say that the ship never looks good. It's horrible CGI all the way until 2019. It looks so horrible in Dark Phoenix.
The what?
It looks so horrible in the first one. The plane, the
Oh,
little
yeah.
ship they
It
fly,
always looks bad.
They never make it look good.
It's never cool. This is a carryover from the comics. It never looks cool in the comics either.
But it looks, in the comics, it looks like a drawing. And in this, it looks like Veggie Tales. Like, it looks so horrible.
It really does.
In all of them, even in, there's like passable CGI in the later movies, and the ship still looks so horrible. There are also only 2 of these 13 movies that I can think of loosely off the top of my head that don't feature a child locked in a cage.
Damn.
Which we've talked about throughout this whole series. I'm not here to say anything else about it other than that is like something that is weird and unique to the series. Their fixation on children being locked in cages.
Yeah. You know what else I would say? A movie that I think about often, I'm not sure if I brought it up on podcast, but I mentioned a lot off podcast, is the movie Push, which came out after the first X-Men, but before a lot of the rest of these, sometime between 2004-ish. It's got Camilla Bell and Chris Evans and Dakota Fanning in it, and it is about mutants who are running away from an agency that's trying to turn them into super soldiers. And it is like an indie, grungy, like shoot 'em up movie almost about superheroes that plays with a lot of the same themes. And to the point about like the kids in cages, they're also like doing the same thing with like keeping the mutant kids in cages and stuff like that in that movie. And also the movie Hannah, about the girl assassin. I think a part that people forget about that movie a lot is that she is not only a badass assassin, she's a badass assassin mutant who was grown in a lab. And that's a part that's like very like underplayed in that movie, but it is also it is also a story of like mutant child super soldiers. So it was like definitely something that was around in the zeitgeist. I think now it would be more interesting, honestly, to look at like other movies besides the X-Men that were coming out at the same time that were indie movies but also had mutants in them, because like the idea of mutation is not copyrighted by anybody. I think movies like that, it like honestly engage with it in a more interesting way, and like the ways that we sometimes wish we talk about like aspirationally for these movies too.
Yeah. I think ultimately the biggest reason why these films fail in the context of watching them as we did, watching the whole series, is just that they're all so much the same movie, particularly all of the X-Men. And I think this is why the MCU achieved the longevity it did, because they realized, certainly not at the beginning, but about halfway through, they were like, oh, we have to make these things really different from each other.
Yeah.
So people will keep watching them.
Yeah.
And these movies just never do that. Like, even, like, Dark Phoenix is kind of the same movie as the original X-Men.
Yeah.
And I think that they just feel like if it's an X-Men movie, it's got to have these things.
Yeah.
And then when you watch 13 of them in a row, or in the mainline series, whatever it is, 7 in a row, it's just exhausting.
Yeah, and that is why movies like Logan, Deadpool, and New Mutants do stand out, because even if the structure is pretty similar, at least it's like different characters, at least it's like a different setting, you know, like at least it's different costumes.
Yeah. Any final thought?
I mean, I would like to say, to be serious for a second, to bring it back all the way back around to the whole Bryan Singer thing. I would like to say that like there is no good reason to watch the movies that Bryan Singer contributed to on this, like in this series, even though I've ranked Apocalypse as my personal favorite. Like, I'm not like would hesitate to like actually recommend anybody to go to watch this. I think that he is like not a good person. You know, and he is profiting off of people watching this still, I'm sure, and giving it attention. And like, I feel bad that we've spent so much time focusing like on work by somebody who is so, you know, distasteful. like all jokes about like the movies being good or bad aside, I do think there's just better things you could do with your time than to watch any of the ones that he contributed to. And if you feel like you can't watch the series without doing that, then you're still not missing much. And like you could perfectly well like go and spend your time watching movies by people who haven't hurt other people in horrible ways. And your time would probably be better spent doing that.
Let's close the book.
Okay, let's do it.
Let's close
We
the book.
never
on
have
the
to watch
X-Men.
another X-Men movie again. How does that make you feel?
That's actually something we should mention, because this, unlike probably any other series we will ever do,
Yeah.
this is like maybe the only series that will actually never have another movie made. Like plenty of them won't, but the only one where we have the assurance, because it was bought by Disney, and there will be plenty of future X-Men movies, but those will be part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And even if they do some crazy multiverse stuff and like bring Hugh Jackman back, that will still be him coming into those movies.
Yeah, it won't attach these movies to that in any way.
Yeah. So we've said that for all of our series, when new movies come out in them, we will go and watch those and interject them into whatever series we're doing at the time.
Just to do something that stays with the times for once.
Yeah, for real. But that will never happen with these movies.
Well, should we announce what we are doing next?
I'd love to.
All right.
Specifically, did not want to pick a series that had any CGI or any action in it whatsoever.
Yeah.
After going through all of these movies.
Yeah.
And after much discussion, we picked our next series. Emmett, do you want to announce it?
She's
And
a
then
director.
I'll talk about it a little bit.
You might know her better from her work on films such as Little Women and Lady Bird. But we will be watching the entire filmography of the director and writer Greta Gerwig.
That's right. We're going to do Greta Gerwig. Yes, obviously director of the hugely acclaimed Lady Bird and Little Women, two warm, lovely movies.
Truly.
We are going to watch all 6 of the movies that she has written. 3 of them she directed. So we are going to watch in order Hannah Takes the Stairs, which will be coming out on Tuesday. We hope you'll take the stairs with us. We're going to watch Nights and Weekends, and those first 2 are part of a movement of realism in indie films called Mumblecore that we are going to be experiencing for the first time and talking about. Then we're going to watch the 2 movies that she wrote for her partner Noah Baumbach to direct, Frances Ha and Mistress America. And it is worth noting that in those first 4, she is also plays the main character. So we're going to see a lot of her as an actress.
Fantastic.
And then we will finish up with the classics Lady Bird and Little Women. I think it's going to be really exciting to, as like the mission of this podcast, to know that we're getting to movies that so many people love and like really examine how we get to that point. And like really tracking her writing and how it progresses through like very different moments in film history that she's been on the cutting edge for every time.
For sure. I'm also interested to see, I've only seen the last 2
As of
hers, and love both of them. And I'm very interested to see how we got there and what I can track from like maybe there's something from the very beginning that's like all ties it all together or something.
Yeah.
Also, it's exciting to be doing a director and a director of our generation. She is older than us, but like a prominent director of our generation. And we hope to be doing director series as well as franchise series and kind of.
Yeah, because we feel that it's just as easy to track how director storytelling changes, especially ones that have as long careers. I mean, we're going to be covering 13 years of Greta Gerwig's writing.
For sure.
I mean, there's nothing wholly original about 2 white guys talking about movies. We know that. It goes back to the founders, Siskel and Ebert, or our more direct correlation, Statler and Waldorf. But I think that sort of the things that set us apart are obviously that it has us on us and our friends who we're so thankful to come along on this journey with us.
For sure.
And also that I think that we are like 5 to 10 years younger than a lot of people making film podcasts of the depth which we are aspiring to. And so I think that what we have is
that kiddie pool depth.
what we have is a real opportunity to talk about some of the directors of our generation, which I think are beloved by like film critics and film Twitter, but aren't. I feel like it's people like David Fincher and Quentin Tarantino, like guys from that generation are always heralded as kind of like the masters.
Right.
And I think that there are lots of young masters, including Greta Gerwig, that I'm excited
For sure.
to dive into and see what we can pull out. So super excited about that.
Very
That will
excited.
be Tuesday.
Starting Tuesday.
Hannah
with
Takes the Stairs.
Stairs.
Yeah.
A movie that I am told has no explosions in it.
What if we just watched them? They're all huge action movies. We had no idea.
I mean, it could happen. We've committed now.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, love you guys. Bye.
Bye. Stay frosty. Frosted. Whatever.
Cinema Bums is a production of DKG Podcast. It is created and produced by Wade Lawrence Holloman and me, Emmett Temple. Wade also edits and mixes this podcast. Our theme music is by Zane Holloman, who you can find on Bandcamp, and our show art is by Autumn Beckner. Our social media is managed by Laura Bennett. If you like what you hear, please tell all your friends and leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, the 2 best ways to spread the word about our work. You can also follow us on Instagram at CinemaBums or email us at cinemabumspod@gmail.com. Don't flake on us. We'll be back next week.